Do you ever go through a phase where you find yourself not really wanting to socialize quite as much? Maybe you have found a way to kind of pour into your own cup and you're not seeing your friends as often. Everybody's kind of like, what's going on? Like, are you mad? Like, what's going on? Where are you, basically? And it reminded me of something. It reminded me of a card that I often used to pull when I used to do some tarot sometimes on a whim. And that is the Hermit. But why does the hermit and seasons of being a hermit have such a bad rep? And how can we pour into ourselves without having this kind of connotation of being a bad friend, of being a bad sibling, of being a bad child? Hello and welcome back to the Kalopsia podcast. I'm your host, Sydney. I'm so thankful that you guys came and clicked on this week's episode. You might be thinking, Sydney, what's going on? Your hair's red. I bought this wig as a Halloween costume and I can't seem to take it off. I keep wearing it and it was very cheap. It's falling apart, but I'm just going to keep rocking with it. So if you guys enjoy this kind of wig switching moment that I've been having on the episodes, if you guys only listen, that you won't really know what I'm talking about. But the last few weeks I've been switching it up a little, and today is a particular switch up, but I digress. This week, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind because I've recently had a few shifts in some relationships in my life, and it kind of has forced me or made me want to turn more inwards, and it makes me want to kind of lean into this hermit season. Now, if you guys don't know, the hermit is a card like in the tarot deck, and this card basically represents, a season of solitude or a period of solitude where you are kind of conserving your energy and pulling back within yourself and pouring into yourself and kind of having that be in seclusion or having that be in solitude, not being around a lot of people. And I have always looked at this card and thought, what a bad thing, what a bad thing. Why are you so alone? Like, why should I have this season by myself? Why should I be so separate and divided from my peers? And not to say that it is dictating what happens in my life, but such a definition or a label to a particular season in my life felt like a bad thing. It felt like a negative. And I was talking to a friend of mine and she was kind of thinking to herself, I haven't really reached out to a lot of people. I haven't really been speaking to a lot of people. Like, am I a bad friend? And I was just hit with the realization that we associate, personal time and being alone, spending time alone with being a bad friend, a bad neighbor, a bad sibling. And this comes back to a theme in my life that I've realized within myself is that I like to make myself available to those around me. And some people who know me might be like, City, wait, you're always on Do Not Disturb. This is true. And I recently realized that using my master's knowledge, right, I'm actually putting my friend's behavior on extinction because normally if you send a text message, you expect a response, you expect them to read it. But if I'm constantly on Do Not Disturb, people know not to text me because they know it's not going to ring on my phone and I'm not going to read it and I'm not going to answer. So I've been placing everybody's behavior on extinction. But when it comes to being in person, when it comes to reaching out to people, I usually like to make myself available. I'm around a lot of the time and I'm thinking, okay, do you want to come with me to do this? Do you want to come with me to do that? Do you want company when you do this? Like, I'm always making myself available. And this is something that I've realized is something that I try to do to pour into my community and to feel strongly about my friendships. And I'm always like, I am a quality time person. That's really how I show and display my love. I love to spend time with other people. Now, what this does, however, is that when you pull away, when you no longer spend as much time with others, then it makes it feel like you are doing them a disservice or you are actively disengaging with others. And that's where it kind of bleeds into this whole mentality in that, okay, I'm a bad friend. If I pour more time into me and pour less time into you and less time into this, then that makes me a bad friend. Now, when I was speaking to my friend about this, I was like, wait, no, let's hold up here. Because what is our definition of a bad friend? Our definition of a bad friend may be someone who lives to tear you down or maybe, says sly remarks or, makes you feel unsafe in the friendship, or maybe someone who lies to you or someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart. That to me is the definition of a bad friend. So why is it that we associate solitude and spending time alone and pulling back with being a bad friend? Now, this made me think more about the essence of solitude in general, right? We've talked about on the podcast before alone time versus being lonely, alone versus alone. And this is really the essence of how we reshift, how we switch our mindset about alone time and how it's not necessarily something that has a relation to our friendships, but more so something that has a relation to ourselves. Now, what do I mean by that? When we think of pulling back, having this hermit season, we think about, maybe pouring more time into ourselves and distancing ourselves from others. What does that connotation, what connotation does that give off, right? It gives off that you are almost shunning others. You're shunning others, you're pushing them away. It's almost like you are secluding yourself. It's almost like, this reminds me of when I was younger, I would get really jealous. I was a really jealous kid, and I oftentimes, this is an only child syndrome thing, I guess, but I would oftentimes like put myself in a corner. I'd put myself in a corner and be like, everybody hates me. Like, I'm just like here. In French, they call it bouder. I would like boud all the time. I was like, just by myself, just like sitting there like, everybody hates me, like sit in the corner. And I feel like that's almost what I apply to hermit seasons now. But it's different there's a distinction between setting yourself apart to be perceived as being separate, to be perceived as being alone, and to be perceived as having been secluded, to being alone for the sake of being alone, for the sake of being able to do things with yourself, by yourself, that you wouldn't normally be able to do. Now, this week, I also watched this video on YouTube by Leah's Field Notes, and she's been on YouTube for a long time, but she had a friend and therapist in this episode or in this YouTube video, and they were discussing friendships and how to build friendships in adulthood. But something that I really loved about that video, the therapist, I think her name is Linda, she brought up is that sometimes you're going to have seasons where friendship isn't the top priority of your life. You're going to have seasons where it's not the forefront of your mind. Maybe you want to instead focus on a project that you really, really want to pour more time into, and socializing and going out and thinking about all these other things in your mind might distract you from that, might pull you away from that, and it might make it more difficult for you to achieve that. Maybe you are, in a relationship and you kind of want to pour more into that, and you kind of are struggling with balancing all of these different things, and maybe you aren't, doing too well, and you want to try to pour into your mindset and try to build yourself up from within. And it's difficult to do that when you're around people and you're comparing yourself and you're looking at this, and it's not malicious, but these are all reasons why we might find ourselves distancing ourselves from our friendships. And I think that what I didn't realize is how friendships ebb and flow in their existence and within a friendship between two people, but they also ebb and flow in the ranks of importance in your life. And I think this is something that I've only just recently realized. When we're younger, we think of friendships as our siblings. At least personally, I was an only child. I looked at my friends and I was like, you guys are my sisters. We're going to be best friends forever. Like, this is like the most important thing. Like, okay, yeah, like there's school and like, sure, I have to apply to college, but like my friends, like that is the most important thing. Like, this is the forefront. This is the forefront of my life. This is like everything. Look, we're going to FaceTime all the time. We're going to do this. We're going to plan a trip. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to go here. We're going to do that. And it becomes kind of the priority. For me, at least, it had become my priority when I was a teenager, elementary through college. It was like my priority. Now, a lot of the time, this often happens when people get into relationships in high school. Then it's like, okay, like this person's not around anymore. Okay, maybe I'm not actually the priority anymore, but I understand, like they're distracted by this one thing, right? But the same phenomenon exists when it comes to ourselves, when it comes to, okay, oh, she got a new job, maybe she's like really, really focused on that. Maybe she's just doesn't have a lot of time, but we often feel like from the receiving end, oh, this person disappeared. This person doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Now, in that video with Linda, the therapist, on Leah's Field Notes channel, she discussed the fact that it's inherently the case that if you find yourself kind of pouring into this hermit season, pulling away, pouring into yourself, quote unquote, secluding yourself, it is to be expected that your friendships are inherently going to be placed on extinction, right? Like I said with the do not disturb, if you consistently do not respond to people, if you consistently kind of like pull away and, pour into other things, that doesn't make you a bad friend per se, but it is going to place those people in extinction. They're not going to reach out as often. They're not going to think of you first when, something happens and they want to speak to someone about it. You might not come up as quickly, and that friendship might then take a step back. And I think that the biggest thing when it comes to the ebbing and flowing of the importance of friendships in your life at a given moment is communication. Communicating with people who you have relationships with, whether that be a parent, whether that be a sibling, whether that be a friend, whether that be a coworker, whether that be your boss, it is so important to mitigating miscommunication. It's so important to understand where the other person is at and to understand other people's intentions. That is where the biggest problem with having a hermit season kind of lies for me. My biggest fear when it is a season in which I want to pour into myself, if I want to just spend more time alone, is that it's going to be received badly. It's going to be received as, they don't want to be my friend anymore. It's going to be received as, they're not dependable anymore. It's going to be received as, I'm not on her radar as like one of her friends. She doesn't really care about what I have to say, or doesn't care about, my life and things like that, right? It can come off as disinterest, and it cannot be nice sometimes to be on the receiving end of it. Now, what we can do to mitigate this is saying to these people, I'm having a season of time where I kind of just want to pour into this relationship. I'm having a season of time where I kind of just want to pour into this project. I'm having a season where I'm not feeling too good, and I think I really just need to pour into myself. It's okay to communicate that, and it's actually okay to even communicate it later. The therapist also said something that was really interesting. She was like, it can never be too late to communicate to someone, what happened to you. Whether it's been weeks. I had a friend of mine, I reached out to her maybe a few weeks ago. She texted me back. She's like, Sydney, I'm sorry I haven't been responding. Like, I'm drowning in work. I'm drowning with these applications. I have all of this to do, and I'm so stressed. And you can hear the stress in the message. And I'm like, listen, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. And it was weeks had gone by, but having that understanding is just enough to be like, okay, it's not that she's ghosting me and doesn't want to be my friend anymore. Okay, this is what's going on. And so the other thing that I want to say, though, when it comes to these hermit seasons and ways in which to not seem disingenuine and not make it seem as though you really just don't care, you don't care how other people perceive you, you don't care how your distance and your pivoting might affect others, is that we need to kind of use our time wisely. If you say to someone, I don't really want to hang out with you right now, or I really want to like take a step back because, I really want to work on this project, and then they see you online and it's like you're traveling and you're hanging out with other people. I think honesty is warranted. Honesty is necessary here. Maybe you don't want to be that person's friend. Maybe you're saying, I really want to focus on my relationship with this person. I can't really like pour into all my friendships at this time, but then you're pouring into other friendships, and it's like, okay, well, which one is it then? I think that something that comes with the hermit season as well is the purpose of that hermit season. I think that is where the line is drawn between secluding yourself in a non-productive way that is only serving to further isolate you and kind of further the spiral that you might already be on. If you are thinking to yourself, am unworthy of these friendships. I hate it. I'm feeling horrible about it, whatever. And then it's just like I'm spiraling and I'm doing whatever. I hate it. And then your friends are trying to reach out and it's like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, what, are you okay? And then you further seclude yourself. And then, I mean, everybody deals with their emotions and their mental health differently. Maybe that's not the best example. Maybe, let's say you really want to focus on a project and you tell everybody, I really don't want to hang out with you guys anymore. Like, I have to focus on this project. And then you don't work on the project at all. And then you also are not hanging out with anybody at all. And so then you find yourself isolated, friendless, and without progress. And then that further like knocks down your self-esteem because you didn't say what you were going to do. And then you also isolated yourself, but then you can't go back to your friendships because you told them that you stopped because you were working on this and you didn't work on that. It can get really complicated, I think. And I can see the slope in my mind of how you can accidentally self-isolate yourself with a hermit season and not do it in a productive way. But what I invite us to think about is, what's the plan? What is the theme of this hermit season? And as a romanticizer myself, I think this is really crucial for me when it comes to having a season of hermit season. And let me give you guys a little example, a little tidbit into my mind recently, right? So I'm on TikTok last night and I'm thinking, I stumbled upon something about what your Mars sign represents, right? And I'm a Virgo Mars. And something about Virgo Mars is how your way of being selfish, it's kind of the planet of selfishness, if I'm understanding correctly. It's how you can pour into yourself and how you can kind of like fuel yourself and water the plant that is you. And mine is in Virgo, which means I thrive on planning. I thrive on routine. I thrive on being able to set myself up for success, doing this, doing that, maybe getting enough sleep, meal prepping myself. Like, that is really where I thrive. I really thrive having that routine, having that workout routine, having my creative routine. That is how I thrive. And so when it comes to that, if I'm thinking to myself, okay, I think I'm going to start spending more time alone because I really, really want to. Whoa, I'm sorry, you guys. I think I saw an eagle. There's a massive, massive, massive bird in the distance who just perched on a tree, a leafless tree, which is making me realize now that the trees are going bare. But no, I digress. I'm sorry, I got distracted because actually the wings were massive. I was so shocked. Anyway, I'm getting old. Birds are interesting. No, I'm kidding. So basically, I'm discovering, okay, I'm a Virgo Mars. I really need to pour into these routines. Maybe that makes me want to spend more time alone, right? What I'm not going to do is say sayonara to everyone and then just not pour into myself, not show up for myself in that way, and then also spend more time alone. And, maybe that just further decays what I'm meant to thrive upon. Does that make any sense? I need a plan. I need a plan to think, okay, what do I want to get out of this time alone? How can I avoid myself from just slipping into the abyss of alone time and isolation? Because, humans do need connection at the end of the day. We do need to socialize. But I think that it's also important for us to understand the value of this hermit season and understanding that friendships as a priority in your life will shift and it will ebb and flow. And I think that's not something I had ever considered until this week. And so here's your hermit season survival guide. We need to shift our mindset on what being a bad friend really means and not apply that to the hermit season. We need to shift our mindset on what alone time means. It's not isolation, it's additional attention for yourself. It's additional attention. It's pampering. It's watering. And we also need to lean on that communication. How do we let our loved ones know, this isn't about you. Like, I kind of really just want to pour into this and do it in an honest way. Do it with honor. And I think that's how we incorporate the hermit season into our lives without hurting our relationships while still keeping them informed, but also understanding that it's necessary. It's necessary to have a season in which the friendships that in your life are not the top priority and you are. I think that's important. And so how can you incorporate a hermit season into your life? Now, I hope that made sense to someone. Sometimes I think this podcast is my therapy. Actually, this journal is my therapy, my real therapist. But, this is where I come to this podcast. I mean, we're chatting, we're thinking, we're shifting our minds. But sometimes I do think it is my therapy as well, because I just come on here with what I've been thinking about this week. But please let me know what you guys think of this topic of the hermit. Also, this hermit card in the tarot deck, it's sad. It's giving dark. It's giving secluded and sad and devastated. But in other decks, it doesn't always look like this. So I think it's interesting also the decks that you use and the emotions that those arise and how different they are. But let me know how you think of the hermit and how you think about it now. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to reach out, and also send in your slices of Kalopsia into the Instagram. It's at kalopsiapod, KALOPSIAPOD on Instagram and TikTok. But yeah, on Instagram we're still doing the dump of just daily slices of beauty. We'll add it all to the deck, if you will, on Instagram feeds. And if you want to reach out to me personally, it's at Sydney Jotita, SYDNEYDJOTITA on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where some of you might be watching this now. But I'm so thankful that you guys clicked on this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next Sunday.